So what other mysteries about this pocket dimension will we learn today? Hey everyone, welcome to Princess of Gay. I'm your host Connie, and today we are here with episode 22 of Delicious in Dungeon. And this is the penultimate reaction to at least this season, because we are going to be doing 23 and 24 together. I have made that decision. So yeah, next week we will be finishing up the season. I don't think it's been said when season 2 will happen, but we do have word that it's happening. So, that being said, last time we left off on kind of being led into this pocket dimension by a ghost, and we find out that all the ghosts in the dungeon are actually people from this pocket dimension who tried to escape. Because the Mad Mage at some point locked away the people of his time, of this old kingdom, into this pocket dimension. And the reason why the old king was seen in the modern day arriving out of the dungeon and then disappearing was because he somehow managed to actually escape. Now we get to meet his grandson, who is, I guess, the current leader of things now in the pocket dimension. And yeah, things seem pretty idyllic there, but the problem is they've been trapped there for all this time. They live in harmony with monsters because of the Mad Mage's spell, but, they don't age. There's positives and negatives, but for them it seems like the negatives are outweighing the positives. And Laios is apparently this prophesied hero who's going to save the day. And of course we know Laios won't do it alone, but he's been prophesied apparently by this winged lion who the people in the dimension seem to worship. So that's interesting in and of itself. They're setting up for a lot of stuff here. And I'm really thinking we're not going to save Fallon by the end of this season. It really sucks. But, yeah, I can't see it happening. There's only 3 episodes left, including this one. And I just can't see, that being resolved in 3 episodes. I just hope that it happens at the beginning of season 2 because, like I said before, this is something that I really don't want to wait until the very, very last minute to have resolved. I don't want them to wait until, right before the final battle. I think that would honestly be stupid. So I really hope that if they're going to resolve it in season 2, it has to happen at the very beginning, like episode 1 and 2. I don't think it'll work otherwise. And honestly, I just think that we need to have actual time with Fallon as a party member. Having her be the goal of the entire series, I feel would devalue her as a character at this point. And I really don't want that to happen. But we'll see how that goes. We're not focusing on that quite yet. It's going to be interesting to see what does happen for this finale, though. If we're going to get, one more fight or any kind of, big revelations that we haven't already gotten. That's stuff I definitely want to know. So, we're going to get into this and just find out. Not waste any more time. See what this episode gives to us, and then again, next week we will do the final 2. So, let's check this out and see what we have in store. Cutting in here real quick to remind you of all the awesome content we have on the channel. Between Monday and Friday, we have a plethora of awesome series reactions with 2 on Wednesday. We also have movie reactions every Saturday and Sunday. I do pre-record them during the week, but upload them on the weekend. And don't forget all of the awesome gaming content we have on the Princess of Gaming channel. We have Baldur's Gate 3 every single day, Horizon Forbidden West every Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. We have Beyond Two Souls on Wednesdays and Sundays, and on Saturdays we have Poppy Playtime. And don't forget to follow the link in the description below to today's reaction. I redirect all reactions just due to copyright, you know how it is. And on top of that, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like this video for more awesome content such as this. Thank you so much for tuning in. Let's get started on today's reaction. And we are back, and we'll begin with spoilers in 3, 2, 1, now. So yeah, we kind of already assumed that he and, well, I mean, we didn't know about his group, but that he had, like, kind of been the first to actually discover the dungeon, based on the line earlier in the episode where it was like, he said he was exploring this dungeon for 10 years, but it was only officially discovered 6 years ago. We kind of already put that together, so that's not like this big, massive surprise at the end. It's just confirming what we already kind of figured. But Senshi is being open and honest with them. And it's not that he hasn't tried to be honest before, he's just never really opened up about himself. It's never come up. He's been journeying with them, becoming friends with them, acting as, you know, the kind of cook of the group. But the opportunity to really introduce himself and, like, explain who he is has never really come up. It's never really been a necessary thing. So, this episode is very interesting for a number of reasons. Not only is it giving Senshi some development, or starting to, but it also showcases a fear of griffins, which we had no clue about before. And like I said in the reaction, everybody has something they're afraid of in real life and in fiction. And I'm not going to be one to, you know, mock someone being afraid of something. Because if someone's genuinely really afraid of something, it's like, why would I make fun of that? That's not okay to do. It affects them very negatively, and they're bothered by it. It's like, that's not really something to make fun of. Even if it's something that I'm not afraid of, even if it's something I don't really understand being afraid of, I don't need to. Like, there's fears that a lot of people have that are very common fears, such as, like, fear of dying, or fear of heights, or fear of spiders. Stuff like that. Very, very common fears. But then there's, like, some kind of weird fears out there, too. But to the people who have them, they're not that weird. In fact, it's terrifying. And it's not really something they can help. Like, sometimes you can work past fears, and sometimes you can't. But you can't help being afraid of something. It's just it's an emotional, mental response to a certain stimulus. And there can be many reasons for it, or it can just be, like, non-reasonable, for lack of a better term, I guess, without reason. Sometimes you're just afraid of something just because you are. It's like, here's an example. A lot of people are afraid of snakes. It's pretty common. I think snakes are the fucking coolest. I think they're adorable. I think they're fun. I love, like, getting to go to, like, places like this place near me called the Reptarium, which is basically just a walk-in reptile zoo that you can, like, interact with the animals with. And it's like, I'll pet snakes, like, you can have them, like, wrapped around your shoulders and neck and stuff. And it's like, yeah, you're perfectly safe because you have the handlers by you, but also, it's like, it's fun. They're adorable. They're cute. I have pictures with them. It's a great time. I love reptiles, and I especially love snakes. So I don't understand people being afraid of them. It makes no sense to me because I don't see them as scary. Yes, there are some snakes out there that are extremely venomous and can kill you. Absolutely. But the snakes, one, you usually see in a place like the Reptarium are not going to be those kind of snakes. And two, it's just like you're not really going to have a chance to interact with those kind of snakes most of the time. You're just not going to be in a situation where you're going to be able to. So it's like the snakes that you usually see are not going to be, any level of dangerous to you. So why be afraid of them? Well, the thing is, because people are afraid of them. I don't need to understand why. I don't need to even agree with it. But if someone's afraid of them, I'm not going to make fun of that. I'm not going to mock them for it. I'm not going to treat them as being wrong for it. Senshi's fear of Griffins here, it's like no one else clearly understands why he is. It's such a specific fear, they don't know the reasoning, and, like, it's not really something he's ever even really hinted at. But when, like, they see the Griffin and when Senshi gets captured by it, it's like they take it seriously. Because they understand, it's like, this is a fucking scary creature. And also, their friend has been taken. Whether or not, like, this idea of, like, questioning his past and everything, or who he is and all, is brought up or not, the fact of the matter is, he's still their friend. And you saw Laios freaking out at him being captured. A lot of people would probably say that he was so scared because he'd be afraid of losing such a good cook and, how he loves food and monsters and stuff. But this is a guy who has lost his sister twice. In horrifying ways. First to a dragon, in a situation that he has a lot of guilt from because it was kind of his fault for not paying attention. And then the second time, he wasn't able to save her with everyone's help after she had already turned into a chimera. After having kind of just disappeared on them. This is a guy who has, like, been going through a lot and hasn't really gotten the chance to process it, and hasn't gotten the chance to fully express how upset it has made him. Laios, like, puts on this kind of goofy personality and everything, and I don't think it's entirely, like, a coping mechanism, because I think it is partially just his personality to be goofy and unserious most of the time. But I do think that he tries to ignore and push away his fears and his feelings. Because he's kind of like this strong fighter type. And I almost feel like he comes across as someone who would want to inspire his friends rather than bring them down. He would want to make them feel safe. And because of that, he doesn't want to panic whenever possible. But that guise kind of just slips entirely when Senshi is kidnapped here by the Griffin. Again, I don't think he's scared just out of the idea of losing such a great cook or anything like that. I don't think he wants to lose anyone else in general. I think he would have had the same reaction if it was Marcel, if it was Chilchuk, even if it was Izutsumi, with her being the newest member and the one they have the least connection to. I don't think he wants to lose anyone else. I think he's afraid of losing anyone else. Like, deeply afraid. To a degree that he will not let, like, show. So when his mask slipped there, he showed all of the fear that was going through him in that moment. And the fact is, like, the fact that I can read this much into his character shows how well he's been written. Because it's like a lot of people on the surface would just see the goofy, monster obsessed weirdo that we do love, but a lot of people may not like have seen the little intricacies of his character throughout this season. How certain things affect him and how much guilt and desperation he's felt over the entire Fallon stuff. Because a lot of the times he does act very goofy. He does act very silly. He's a weirdo. And a lot of people just look at the surface level stuff with that. But he's much deeper than that as a character, and I love that this show can make that very clear. And I assume the manga does as well. That it makes it very clear that he's holding back his emotions. That he's putting on a strong face, not only for everyone else, but for himself, too. It probably makes him feel better. It probably feels like if he can stay strong, he won't have to think about it. How scared he is for his sister. It's not just a coping mechanism, but that is part of it. And I think that's entirely believable and realistic for someone to go through in this situation. As someone who has lost family members, who has had a great aunt and uncle and my grandfather all pass away, it's like I understand what it's like to be afraid to lose other people. But also to be putting on kind of a brave face during and after this kind of stuff happens, because you don't want to let out all these emotions and break, basically. It's very hard to deal with emotions, and it's something that comes across as simple in a lot of media, and it's something that's bothered me because it's probably one of the least simple things a person will ever go through. When a loved one is in danger or is threatened in any way, or even does pass away, the myriad of emotions that go through you is unbelievable. There's so many emotions, so many feelings, so many thoughts going through your head at once that it overwhelms you. And it makes it hard to deal with. And if you're someone like me, who is also autistic and does not deal with pressure very well at all, like actually really has a fucking hard time dealing with any level of pressure or stress, it's like magnified. You have what is already extremely complex, tough feelings for neurotypical people even. But then you add in the bullshit that I have to go through being autistic, and it's like, oh, I am just not okay. I am an absolute disaster right now, and I can't really function. And again, I've gone through this multiple times. I was living in Georgia at the time when I got the news that my great aunt passed away, and I was really close with her. Like, I was probably closer with her than anyone else in my extended family. And when I got the news, like I was in I want to say 10th grade at the time. I was being picked up from school, and my father told me, and I shut down. Like I didn't even cry because I couldn't cry. I couldn't process that. I emotionally shut down probably for at least a week, possibly more. I don't remember exactly, but it was a while, and I was barely responsive the entire time. And this is from someone who's like already like a pretty quiet, like keep to myself person, especially back in those days. Like I was a lot worse, and I was not okay. I was not processing much of anything okay. I my schooling suffered because of it. My social life suffered because of it. For the social life that I had, um, and just even my ability to enjoy anything suffered because of it. And then years later, when my uncle passed away, it's like it didn't affect me at quite as much and to the same level, but I definitely felt that same kind of heavy emotion. And the same with my grandfather when that ended up happening. It's like it hits so hard that I didn't even really cry as much for my great aunt. Going back to that, I cried more for my uncle and my grandfather. But even then, it's like it's almost like a just a state of shock, and that just kind of shut me down. And so it's like seeing like Lyos's emotion here, seeing him almost on the verge of shutting down himself. Like he was like practically frozen with fear. It's like I understand the kind of like extreme, not sorrow, but concern and fear and pain that was going through his mind in that moment. Like, if something had happened to Senshi and he, didn't make it, I don't know if Laios would have been able to handle that. I don't know if he would have been able to handle it. Even with the dungeon's curse, I think it could have broken him a bit. I genuinely do. Although, are they in the dungeon currently? It's kind of okay, so that's a thing I also want to bring up. It was kind of unclear if they're in the dungeon or if they're still in the pocket dimension. It was mentioned that they were going to be brought back by the spirits, right? But had they already done so? I think they did, but I'm not 100% sure. It really didn't like hammer that in for me. And that just might be me being stupid. I'll admit that. But I think they're back simply because of Izetsumi having, consciousness again and being able to not be just a common house cat. I think that's kind of the biggest evidence that they're back. But it never really made like a notable statement of like, oh, we're back in our world now. Again, maybe I'm just being dumb. But yeah, I think they're back because of Izetsumi. Even talking through it now, it makes it almost guaranteed. It's just yeah. But if and with them being back in the dungeon, then yeah, the curse would still be in effect. But again, I think it would have still broken Laios, even with that, because it's just like it would have just been one thing too far for him. Is it bad that I almost want that to happen though? Like that sounds terrible, but there's a part of me that wants that breakdown to happen because I think it would be like a great character moment that would allow the depth of Laios and his character to be shown a lot more. and expressed in a really well handled way. Plus, we could see how like others are affected by his breakdown and everything. And I think they could do a lot for honestly all of these characters. So there's a kind of a side of me that morbidly wants that to happen. Not necessarily for someone to die, but for Laios to have a breakdown. I don't necessarily think it will, but I would like to see that. Just from a character building standpoint. Um, so, outside of that, this this episode basically sets some things up. We learned that the Mad Mage is named Thistle, and that he like grew up as basically best friends with the old king, Yod's grandfather. And he became embroiled in black magic and a lust for power, and that's what eventually caused all of this to happen. But we also know that he is still looking for Lord Delgal. So we know his loyalty and love for Delgal is still there, which is not a surprise at all, because we already kind of got that feeling from the living painting episode when he seemed fiercely protective over Delgal to the point where he was really fucking terrifying when confronting Laios. He was fiercely protective. So it's not a surprise at all to find out that they were that close. It's just didn't really know that was going to be revealed here. You know. But after our heroes head back to the dungeon, we do see Thistle has confronted Yod, which might not be good. Yod might be dead. It's very possible. I am still wondering, though, if we're going to have one more confrontation with Thistle before the end of the season. Like, with our main party. Because Thistle is, I mean, absolutely the best part of this series. I know a lot of people, like, really go ham over Senshi or Marcel, or hell, even Marcel and Fallon as a ship. A lot of people really love the recipe stuff and the lore. For me specifically, the best part of this series is Thistle. Like, if you remember back, the when the living painting episode happened, our first time meeting Thistle, instantly, like, gripped at my attention. Like, violently grabbed my attention, and it's just like, who is this fucking elf? Who is this? This character is obviously important as fuck, is a major player in this game. Who is this? I was so invested instantly by Thistle's debut. Instantly. I was super invested. Because it's like, it was such a well done debut. It was so well handled. It was so genuinely terrifying. And at the same time, so, like, exciting. Because it's like, you have this character who is very clearly extremely important to the story. You just don't know how yet. Who is actively fucking terrifying. Which is always a plus for me. And who very clearly is going to, like, have some amazing moments based on just their presence alone. You have this character who is very clearly, like, someone you just want to know everything about. And so it's like you're waiting, you're going through the episodes, but waiting for more. And things start to get put together little by little. You either see more of him, or you put together more based on other information. And eventually it's figured out, okay, he's the Mad Mage. He's the one who created this dungeon. Um, you start to figure things out with his purpose or his role, and figure he has a lot more control here than you realized, and things keep adding up. And so it's like everything else is happening with Laios and Marcel and all the other stuff. They bring in these other characters from these other parties and all, and this is all amazing. And like I said, like a couple episodes back, the episode with Fallon as the Chimera and everything, that is the episode of this series, at least for season one. That is the episode that has just taken this fandom, the anime fandom in general, by storm. It is the moment that everybody talks about. It is the imagery that just has overtaken all of Delicious in Dungeons fan art. And it's more than just fan art, by the way. I've seen like custom made figures and stuff. I've seen plushes. I've seen cosplays. I have seen so goddamn much for Fallon, Dragon, Chimera. There is so goddamn much fan works made for that. It is insane. And I mean that in the best way. Because people see something super interesting and cool and they latch onto it. They latch onto it because it stands out amongst everything else. And while I agree that Fallon's Chimera form does do that for me, I'm sorry, Thistle does it for me more. That might be a surprise. That might be like a really like shocking take. But it's like every time I hear anything about Thistle, anytime I see Thistle in action, it's just like, it just does it for me. It is just the most hype parts of this series. It is so exciting, so terrifying, and it's just like, this is how you do a villain. Like, for me, this is how you do a villain. You make them so interesting that the viewer can't help but practically be begging for them to appear again. You make them so interesting that the viewer gets so invested in seeing them again that every time they come up, it's like just the coolest fucking thing. I didn't expect him to appear here. Like, I mean, getting some lore on him and everything, it's like, okay, fair. I kind of expected that. But then he just appears right behind Yod out of nowhere. It's like the hairs on my entire body, honestly, stood on end. Like, I was kind of in shock. I had a reaction. I don't even entirely remember what my reaction was. I think I was just like, oh, hi, something like that. Because I couldn't fully process the fact that he was just suddenly there out of nowhere. I couldn't entirely process the fact that he just appeared right behind Yod and then just threatens his life. Very blatantly, very openly, not even subtle about it. Yod is probably dead, and it's like, fuck. Fuck, that's cool. It sounds bad to like say fuck that's cool to like a possible character death of someone who's very clearly a really nice guy. But it's like a good villain makes you feel that. Even if you like the character who's dying, it's like with the villain being that good, it's just like, fuck, that's cool. It's like I can't even help it. Naoki Urasawa's Monster with Johann Liebert. That is a great example of another villain who absolutely gives that vibe. If you haven't seen Monster, I would suggest seeing it, but only if you can handle heavy depression. Because that series is very serious and very dark. It takes a lot out of you. If you can handle that, watch it. It's almost a necessity that you do if you can handle it. If something like that would actively like bring you down to a degree that it would affect your mental health, probably not a good idea to watch it, because again, it gets really heavy. Like really heavy. And the fact that it's so serious as a show and doesn't really let up on that heaviness makes it a lot harsher than if it did have some comedy or levity in general to balance it out. It doesn't have that. But Johann Liebert is the kind of villain who is like the same as how I'm describing Thistle here. Johann is a villain who is so obnoxiously charismatic that it's like every time you see him, it's like you just have your face in your hands and are just like watching with full undivided attention, just absolutely astounded by how damn good he is. And if you do watch it, by the way, watch it in the dub, because Keith Silverstein voices Johann, and oh my god, one of the best voice acting performances, period. Like in anything. In any language. Keith Silverstein's performance as Johann Liebert is chilling. It is so fucking good. But enough gushing over Keith Silverstein being a phenomenal voice actor and his specific performance there as Johann. Going back to the topic at hand, Thistle is this same level of villain for me. There's just sometimes a villain who is just that fucking good, even when they don't have many appearances. And Thistle has not had that many appearances. But I'm like really excited to see more of him, and I hope that by within these last 2 episodes next time we get to see like another big confrontation with him. And even more so, I hope in season 2 we get a lot of him. Because it's just like I want as much as I can get. Honestly, like I've said kind of before that Marcel's like my favorite character in this, but I think it actually might be Thistle. Marcel's my favorite main hero character, but I think Thistle might be my favorite overall, just because of the pure hype I feel every time he appears. I like genuinely think he's one of the better villains I've seen in anime. I would genuinely put him up there. With the likes of Johann, with the likes of Light Yagami, I genuinely think he's that good. Like, I think like if he had more screen time, it would actually take away from him. His presence almost kind of relies on the fact that he doesn't have as much screen time. So yeah. Anyway, sorry for ranting about this so much. Or I guess it's not really a rant as much as a ramble. But it's like sometimes you just need to gush. Like there's some things about this series that not don't necessarily annoy me or whatnot, but just don't really quite get it right for me. There's some things that are just a little off here and there, which most shows have. The vast majority of shows are like that, to some degree. Some more than others, some, a lot less. But this series, it's like, yeah, there's plenty of things that I'm not a huge fan of. There's certain episodes that I just don't really like that much. But the things it gets right, it like really gets right. It's like so damn good. when it's at its best. I just wish it was more consistent with that. But I can still appreciate it for what we do get. Because I understand not every show is going to be Carol and Tuesday. And what I mean by that, if you didn't watch my Carol and Tuesday reactions, which please do if you haven't. What I mean by that is Carol and Tuesday is one of the most consistent shows I think I've ever seen. Maybe up there with Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. In not just in the fact that it's consistently amazing, but it's so consistent with it, in my opinion, that it is I think it's the closest I've ever seen a show get to actual perfection for me. That and Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, I think, are the two shows that I would say are the actively closest to perfection. They're not necessarily my personal favorites, but in terms of like actual like consistent quality, I don't think either show has a bad episode. They might have like a scene or something I'm not exactly the most fond of. But as a episode, every episode of Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood is amazing. Every episode of Carol and Tuesday is amazing. It's just, it's one of the, it's two of those cases, I guess, where it's as close to perfection as you can get. And for a show, that's a lot harder to do than with like a movie. Because with a movie, it's like most of the time you're one and done. And even if it is a sequel or a prequel or something, it's like you can still judge it kind of on its own as well. But with a series, you have to judge it by the whole. And it's like, okay, some episodes might be phenomenal, but some episodes might not be. Some might be really bad, actually. Like Carol and Tuesday, or not Carol and Tuesday at this point. I was just talking about that, but Legend of Korra is a show I absolutely fucking adore. I think it is excessively underrated, and I think that it's honestly, for me, better than Avatar: The Last Airbender. But it's not perfect. It has episodes I don't like. Mostly in season 2, but still. But it's still one of my favorite shows. And that's normal. But then you have like two shows like that, and it's just like practically perfection. And those are shows that like you almost feel like other shows should strive to be like. But you don't expect any other shows to be like either. Because you know that reaching that level of perfection is pretty much impossible for most things. It's just like lightning struck twice, and at least so far, from what I've seen, that's the only times it has. Like, even Link Click, as much as I fucking adore that show, isn't quite on that level. And then Delicious in Dungeon is pretty average in terms of that for me. Like, it has these moments that are just like top tier, really fucking good, but then moments I'm just not as big of a fan of. And I feel like that's pretty normal. So the show as a whole doesn't do anything spectacular. But again, when it hits those right moments, it really hits it right. And certain elements of the show are just exceptional. So it's like, it almost feels more special because of that when it does happen, because it's not just so consistently amazing. But yeah, it's like I really hope we get like even more of Thistle in these last 2 episodes. And I just want to see more of him in general. But tell me what your thoughts are on this episode of Delicious in Dungeon. Thank you so much for tuning in. For now, I'm Connie, and I'm signing off. See y'all next time.